narrative.
7 days of absolute silence in my own home. It started with a slammed door after dinner last Tuesday. No explanation, no argument beforehand. Just cold, calculated silence that hung in the air like poison. Every "good morning" met with turned shoulders. Every question answered with nothing but the sound of footsteps walking away. At first, I thought something terrible had happened. I checked her social media, called her friends, even contacted her mother. Everyone said the same thing. She seems fine to us. That's when I realized this wasn't about communication. It was about control. I'm not a mind reader. Never claimed to be. 3 years of marriage, and somehow I was expected to decode what offense I'd committed this time. Was it because I worked late last week? Or that I didn't compliment the new decoration in the living room? Perhaps I breathed too loudly while she was watching her shows. By day 3, I stopped trying. The constant rejection was becoming humiliating. I cooked my own meals, slept in the guest room, and lived as if I were alone. The silence became a third person in our home, growing larger each day while my patience grew thinner. 5th day, I caught her watching me from the kitchen as I got ready for work. The moment our eyes met, she looked away instantly, but not before I saw something in her expression. Satisfaction. She was enjoying this power play, testing how long I would endure this childish punishment. That night, scrolling through old contacts on my phone, I saw a name that brought back memories from years ago. Alexandra. We grew up together, dated briefly in college before life pulled us in different directions. She always had this infectious laugh that made everyone around her smile. The kind of woman who entered a room and commanded attention without trying. My wife met her once at a reunion and hated her immediately. "Stay away from that woman," she had demanded afterward. I complied to keep the peace, like I always did. But now, with the silent treatment entering its 6th day, something shifted inside me. Alexandra had reached out a few weeks ago, just passing through town next weekend. Drinks for old time's sake. I had politely declined then. Too busy with work. Too concerned about upsetting the delicate peace at home. The message still sat there in my inbox, unanswered. I stared at the phone screen, the house eerily quiet except for the sound of my wife's favorite TV show playing in the living room. 6 days of silence. 6 days of psychological warfare. I began typing a response to Alexandra. "Still in town? I'd love to catch up tomorrow night." The moment I hit send, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control over my own life. If my wife wanted silence, I would give her something worth talking about. Alexandra's response came almost immediately. "Thought you'd never ask. The Craftsman at 8? I smiled at my phone screen, a genuine smile that felt foreign on my face after nearly a week of forced neutrality. I glanced toward the living room where my wife sat scrolling through her phone, still pretending I didn't exist. "Perfect," I replied. "Looking forward to seeing you again." The next morning, I woke up feeling oddly liberated. Day 7 of the silent treatment, and for the first time, I wasn't bothered by it. I showered, shaved meticulously, and put on my best cologne, the expensive one I save for special occasions. As I buttoned up my shirt in front of the mirror, I caught myself smiling. Tonight wouldn't be about my wife's childish games anymore. It would be about reclaiming my dignity. Throughout the day at work, my phone buzzed with messages from Alexandra. Each notification sent a rush of excitement through me. We reminisced about college pranks, shared updates on mutual friends, and flirted just enough to walk that dangerous line between friendly and something more. The conversation flowed effortlessly, unlike the constant eggshell walking I'd grown accustomed to at home. "Remember that night at Lake Morrison?" she texted. How could I forget? Midnight swimming under a full moon, her silhouette against the water, the way she kissed me on the dock afterward. That was 10 years ago, before responsibilities and mortgage payments. Before I met my wife. When I arrived home that evening, my wife was in the kitchen preparing dinner. For herself, obviously. I watched her for a moment from the doorway. The determined way she ignored my presence was almost theatrical. 7 full days now. A whole week of punishment for a crime I wasn't even aware of committing. I walked past her to the bedroom to change clothes for my evening out. As I selected a jacket, I heard her footsteps pause outside the door. She was watching, curious about my unexpected preparations. Typically by now, I would have been begging for forgiveness, desperate to end the silent treatment. But not today. My phone chimed with another message from Alexandra. I deliberately left it unlocked on the bed while I changed shirts, knowing my wife could see the screen from where she stood. Alexandra had sent a selfie from the bar. She looked stunning. Red dress, that confident smile that always turned heads. The text read, "Can't wait to see you." Like old times. When I turned around, my wife was standing in the doorway, arms crossed. I could see the questions in her eyes, the slight tension in her jaw. But still, not a single word. The silent treatment remained her weapon of choice. "Fine by me. Don't wait up," I said casually, walking past her with a confidence I hadn't felt in months. The sweet scent of my cologne lingered in the air between us. I caught a glimpse of her expression in the hallway mirror, confusion mixed with the first hints of worry. The drive to the Craftsman gave me time to reflect. Was I being petty? Perhaps. But after endless cycles of these manipulative silent treatments over minor offenses, real or imagined, something had to change. A relationship built on punishment and control wasn't a partnership. It was a power struggle. When I arrived, Alexandra was already there, holding court at the bar. Several men were clearly trying to get her attention, but the moment she saw me, her face lit up. She slid off her stool and embraced me, lingering just long enough to remind me of what we once shared. "You look amazing," I said truthfully. "You don't look so bad yourself," she replied, eyes taking me in appreciatively. "Though I'm surprised you actually showed up. Didn't think you had it in you anymore." The slight challenge in her voice wasn't lost on me. The man she knew in college would never have tolerated being treated the way my wife had been treating me. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost myself in trying to keep an impossible peace. "People change," I said, signaling the bartender. "Then sometimes they change back." 3 drinks in, Alexandra rested her hand on my arm, leaning in close to be heard over the music. The familiar scent of her perfume brought back a flood of memories. My phone buzzed repeatedly in my pocket. I checked it to find 5 messages from my wife, the first communication in a week. "Where are you? Who are you with? Why aren't you answering? Hello? I need you to pick up milk on your way home." The last one almost made me laugh out loud. Classic. Break the silence not with an apology, but with a demand. I put the phone back in my pocket without responding. "Everything okay?" Alexandra asked, noticing my expression. I smiled, feeling more certain than ever about my next move. "Better than okay. But I think it's time we take this conversation somewhere else." She raised an eyebrow. "Your place?" I nodded, finishing my drink. "Exactly my place." The drive home with Alexandra felt electric. Her perfume filled my car, mixing with the lingering scent of whiskey and possibilities. She placed her hand on my thigh as I drove, her touch confident and familiar. I found myself driving slightly under the speed limit, savoring these moments before whatever storm awaited at home. "So she really hasn't spoken to you for an entire week?" Alexandra asked, shaking her head in disbelief. "And you don't even know why?" "That's the game," I replied, turning onto my street. "I'm supposed to figure it out, then grovel for forgiveness. Been the pattern for years now. And you've put up with this because?" The question hung in the air. Why had I tolerated this for so long? The manipulative cycles, the emotional blackmail, the walking on eggshells. Somewhere along the line, I'd convinced myself that peace at any cost was worth it, that loving someone meant accepting their toxic behaviors. Inertia, I finally answered, and the foolish belief that things would improve if I just tried harder. Alexandra squeezed my thigh gently. The guy I knew in college would never have let anyone treat him that way. Her words stung because they were true. I'd changed, compromised away pieces of myself until I barely recognized the man in the mirror each morning. But that ended tonight. As we pulled into the driveway, I noticed all the lights were on in the house. My wife's shadow moved behind the living room curtains. I checked my phone, 12 missed calls and 23 text messages in the past hour. The silent treatment was clearly over on her end, though I hadn't responded to a single message. "Ready for this?" Alexandra asked, her expression a mixture of concern and excitement. "More than ready," I replied, turning off the engine. When we walked through the front door, my wife was standing in the hallway, arms crossed tightly over her chest. The look of shock on her face when she saw Alexandra beside me was almost comical. Her eyes widened, lips parted, body frozen in disbelief. "Look who I ran into," I said casually, helping Alexandra out of her coat. "You remember Alexandra from the college reunion, right?" The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. 1 minute. 2 minutes. My wife's eyes darted between us, calculations visibly running through her mind as she tried to process this unexpected development. 3 minutes of strained silence. Alexandra smiled warmly, seemingly unaffected by the tension. Your home is beautiful. The artwork in particular. Is that an original piece? She moved toward a painting in the living room, heels clicking confidently on the hardwood floor. 5 minutes now. My wife remained statue still, her silent treatment now less a weapon and more a paralysis. I moved to the kitchen, pulling out 3 wine glasses. Red or white? I called out, knowing exactly what I was doing. Red, please, Alexandra answered, examining the bookshelves now. Oh, you have Fitzgerald's collected works. We used to argue about his best novel for hours, remember? 6 minutes. My wife followed me into the kitchen, her movements stiff. I could feel her eyes boring into my back as I uncorked a bottle of Cabernet. When I turned around, the fury in her expression was unmistakable, but still, not a word. Alexandra appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with easy confidence. You know, I was just telling your husband how much I've missed our conversations. No one challenges my thinking quite like he does. And that was it. 6 minutes and 43 seconds, to be exact. What is SHE doing in our house? My wife's voice erupted, breaking her self-imposed silence with a volcanic force that made the wine glasses vibrate. I handed Alexandra a glass before answering. Found your voice rather quickly, didn't you? It's amazing what 7 days of silence can do for the vocal cords. My wife's face flushed crimson. You brought her here? To our home. I took a deliberate sip of wine, maintaining eye contact over the rim of my glass. I thought you weren't speaking to me. In fact, I thought I'd become invisible this past week. Funny how that works. Alexandra cleared her throat softly. Perhaps I should give you two some privacy. No, I said firmly, without looking away from my wife. Alexandra is my guest. She's welcome here. My wife's eyes narrowed dangerously. You know exactly what you're doing. Do I? I countered, setting my glass down. Because for 7 days, I've had no idea what I supposedly did wrong. 7 days of being punished for a crime I wasn't even informed of. So enlighten me. What exactly am I doing wrong now? The kitchen fell silent again, but this silence was different, charged with confrontation rather than avoidance. My wife glanced at Alexandra, then back at me, realization dawning in her eyes. She'd lost control of her carefully orchestrated power play, and she knew it. You did this deliberately, she whispered, voice trembling with anger. You brought her here to hurt me. Alexandra sipped her wine, watching the exchange with measured interest. The confident presence of another woman in our home, especially one my wife had explicitly warned me about, had accomplished in 7 minutes what I couldn't achieve in 7 days, breaking through the wall of silence. I stepped closer to my wife, lowering my voice. Hurt you? That's rich coming from someone who's been psychologically torturing me for a week. Tell me, how does it feel to get a taste of your own medicine? My wife's face contorted with a mixture of rage and disbelief. The careful composure she'd maintained throughout her week-long silent campaign crumbled completely. She slammed her hand on the counter. How dare you? You know exactly why I was upset with you. I raised an eyebrow, maintaining my calm. Actually, I don't. That's the entire point. But please, enlighten me now that you've decided I'm worthy of conversation again. Alexandra leaned against the kitchen island, watching our exchange with curious intensity. Her presence was like gasoline on an already volatile situation, and we all knew it. I can't believe you'd do this, my wife hissed, her voice trembling. Bringing her here, to our home? You know how I feel about her. Yes, I'm quite aware. I replied, taking another sip of wine. Just as I'm aware of how you feel about using silence as punishment. Interesting how quickly you can find your voice when properly motivated. Alexandra cleared her throat softly. The silent treatment is actually considered a form of emotional abuse, psychologically speaking. It creates an environment of rejection and abandonment. My wife's head snapped toward her. Nobody asked you. This is between me and my husband. Is it? I interjected. Because for the past week, there hasn't been anything between us. You made sure of that. The kitchen fell into tense silence again. Alexandra sipped her wine with practiced ease, unbothered by the hostility radiating from my wife. I had to admire her composure. She wasn't backing down or apologizing for her presence. You did this deliberately to hurt me, my wife said, her voice lower now, accusatory. I invited an old friend over for a drink. I countered. The fact that this hurts you says more about your insecurities than my intentions. My wife's eyes narrowed. Old friend? Is that what we're calling her now? Alexandra smiled slightly. We go way back. Before you were in the picture. That comment landed exactly as intended. My wife's posture stiffened, and I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. 7 days of silent treatment had given her control. She'd been so confident in her power that she never anticipated I might change the rules of engagement. You should leave, my wife told Alexandra, attempting to reclaim some authority. That's not your decision to make, I said firmly. This is my home too, despite how you've been treating me like an unwelcome ghost for a week. Alexandra set her wine glass down. Actually, I should probably head out. Early meeting tomorrow. She turned to me with a warm smile. Thanks for tonight. It was great catching up. The way she emphasized catching up was deliberately ambiguous, leaving my wife to fill in the blanks with her imagination. I walked Alexandra to the door, aware of my wife's eyes following our every move. At the doorway, Alexandra embraced me, lingering just long enough to make a point. She whispered in my ear, loud enough for my wife to hear from where she hovered in the hallway. Call me tomorrow. This was fun. When I closed the door behind her and turned around, my wife was standing with her arms crossed, fury radiating from every inch of her body. How could you disrespect me like this? The audacity of her question nearly made me laugh. Disrespect you? That's rich coming from someone who's been treating me like I don't exist for 7 days. You were on your phone all weekend during my parents' visit, she exploded. You barely engaged with anyone. Do you know how embarrassing that was for me? So that was it. After a week of psychological warfare, the crime was finally revealed. I checked work emails during her parents' marathon 6-hour visit. That's your justification for a week of silent treatment? I had an urgent project deadline. I explained that before they arrived. You always have an excuse. You never prioritize my family. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Let me get this straight. Instead of telling me you were upset, you decided to punish me with a week of silence. No communication, no chance to address the issue. Just emotional manipulation. She scoffed. It's not manipulation. I needed space. Space is saying I need some time alone. What you did was punishment, pure and simple. I moved toward the staircase. And bringing Alexandra here? That was me showing you exactly how it feels to be on the receiving end of someone else's power play. My wife followed me. Are you sleeping with her? You don't get to disappear from our marriage for a week and then demand answers about my personal life. I replied coldly. Your personal life? I'm your wife. Are you? I stopped on the stairs, turning to face her. Because wives typically communicate with their husbands. They don't use silence as a weapon and emotional intimacy as a bargaining chip. Her face crumpled slightly, the first sign that my words were penetrating her anger. So what now? You're going to start seeing her to get back at me. I shook my head slowly. This isn't about Alexandra. This is about respect and how we treat each other. Tonight was about showing you exactly what your silence feels like from the other side. By hurting me? Her voice cracked slightly. By making you feel exactly what I've been feeling, I corrected. Confused. Rejected. Angry. Humiliated. Sound familiar? We stood there on the staircase. The power dynamic between us fundamentally altered. For the first time in our marriage, I wasn't apologizing for a crime I didn't commit. I wasn't chasing her forgiveness or begging for her attention. I think we need to have a serious conversation about this relationship, I said finally. But not tonight. I'm going to sleep in the guest room. As I turned to climb the stairs, she grabbed my arm. Wait. You can't just. I gently but firmly removed her hand. I've waited 7 days for you to decide I was worth speaking to. You can wait until tomorrow for this conversation. Morning arrived with a strange calm settled over the house. I'd slept better in the guest room than I had in our bed for months. There was something liberating about finally confronting the toxic patterns rather than tiptoeing around them. I showered, dressed, and headed downstairs to find my wife already at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a coffee mug, eyes red from what appeared to be a sleepless night. We need to talk, she said as I entered. Yes, we do. I poured myself coffee and sat across from her, maintaining enough distance to think clearly. Too often in the past, these conversations ended with her tears, my apologies, and nothing actually resolved. She pushed her hair back nervously. You embarrassed me last night. Bringing that woman into our home was completely disrespectful. I took a slow sip of coffee, letting her statement hang in the air before responding. Interesting that you start with what I did wrong, rather than acknowledging your behavior for the past week. That's different, is it? Explain how. My tone remained even, controlled. She shifted uncomfortably. I was upset about something. I needed space. Space is asking for space. What you did was punishment, designed to make me suffer until I figured out what arbitrary rule I'd broken and begged for forgiveness. I leaned forward slightly. That's not a relationship. That's emotional manipulation. You're exaggerating, she scoffed. It wasn't that serious. 7 days of being treated like I don't exist? Of being ignored in my own home? Talking to walls? That's not serious. I shook my head. If I did that to you, would you consider it acceptable behavior? Her eyes dropped to her coffee. The silence between us now was different, thoughtful rather than punitive. Look, I continued, what happened last night wasn't about Alexandra. It was about showing you exactly what your games feel like from the other side. Did you enjoy feeling confused? Jealous? Powerless? Because that's been my entire week. So this was revenge? She asked, voice hardening again. No, this was a mirror. Sometimes people need to see their own behavior reflected back at them to understand its impact. I paused, gathering my thoughts. We can't continue like this. These cycles of silent treatment, me walking on eggshells, you wielding emotional intimacy as a weapon, it's destroying whatever we had. Her expression softened slightly, perhaps recognizing the truth in my words. I don't know how to communicate when I'm upset. That's not an excuse. That's something you need to work on if you want this marriage to survive. I kept my voice firm, but not unkind. We're not children. Silent treatment isn't a solution, it's a poison. She looked up sharply. And bringing your ex to our house is mature communication? I never claimed it was. It was a calculated decision to break a destructive pattern. And it worked, didn't it? Here we are, finally talking about the real issues. My phone buzzed on the table. A text message from Alexandra. Hope things went okay after I left. Here if you need to talk. My wife's eyes darted to the screen before I could turn it over. Her mouth tightened. Are you sleeping with her? The question came out strangled, halfway between accusation and fear. No, I answered truthfully. But the fact that you immediately jumped to that conclusion shows how broken the trust is between us. She stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen. What am I supposed to think? You reconnect with her the moment things get difficult between us. Difficult, I repeated incredulously. You created this situation. You chose to shut down all communication as punishment. Actions have consequences. You can't emotionally check out of this marriage whenever it suits you and expect me to just take it. So what now? She demanded. You're teaching me a lesson by threatening our marriage. I sighed deeply. This isn't a threat. It's an ultimatum. I won't live like this anymore. The silent treatments, the emotional games, the punishment for crimes I don't even know I've committed. It stops now, or I walk. Her face paled. For perhaps the first time, she realized I was serious. The usual pattern, her anger, my appeasement, had been disrupted beyond repair. You'd throw away our marriage over this? Her voice trembled slightly. I'm not the one who's been throwing it away, piece by piece. Every time you choose manipulation over honest communication. I stood up, creating physical distance to match the emotional one that had been growing for months. I deserve better than this. We both do. She reached for my hand, her touch uncertain. I don't want to lose you. I didn't pull away, but I didn't return the gesture either. Then prove it. Actions, not words. No more silent treatment. No more emotional warfare. If you're upset, tell me directly. If we have a problem, we address it like adults. And what about her? She asked, unable to even say Alexandra's name. Alexandra was a catalyst, not the issue. But my friendships aren't up for negotiation anymore. Trust goes both ways. I picked up my phone, putting it in my pocket. I'm going to stay with my brother for a few days. We both need space, real space, not punitive silence, to think about what we want from this marriage. The look of shock on her face was immediate. You're leaving? I'm taking a step back. There's a difference. I echoed her earlier justification for the silent treatment, the irony not lost on either of us. When I return, we'll either commit to rebuilding this relationship the right way, or we'll admit it's beyond repair. As I packed a small bag upstairs, I heard her crying in the kitchen. In the past, Those tears would have immediately weakened my resolve, sent me rushing to comfort her and apologize for causing her pain. Not today. Sometimes caring for someone means refusing to participate in the dynamics that harm you both. 3 months have passed since that morning in the kitchen. 3 months of fundamental change, some painful, some liberating. My week at my brother's apartment stretched into 2 as I realized how much clarity distance provided. For the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts without the constant pressure to anticipate her reactions. She called constantly those first few days. Texts ranged from tearful apologies to bitter accusations. The old me would have rushed back at the first sign of her distress. Instead, I held firm. I'll come home when we're both ready to have an honest conversation about our future. After 2 weeks, we agreed to meet on neutral ground, a quiet coffee shop downtown. She looked smaller somehow, less assured. The woman who had weaponized silence now struggled to fill it with meaningful words. "I've been seeing a therapist," she said after we'd settled with our drinks. "Twice a week." It wasn't what I expected to hear. "That's good. What prompted that? You leaving?" She traced the rim of her cup nervously. "I never thought you actually would." It made me realize how many relationships I've ruined with these patterns. We talked for 3 hours that day. Really talked, perhaps for the first time since our wedding. She'd grown up watching her mother use silence as control, had internalized it as normal relationship behavior. The revelation wasn't an excuse, but it was context I'd never understood before. I moved back home cautiously. We established clear boundaries. No silent treatment ever again. Counseling twice monthly. Honest communication even when uncomfortable. The first few weeks felt like learning to walk again after an injury. Awkward, painful, but progressively stronger. Then came the night she saw an innocent text from Alexandra on my phone. Just checking in, nothing more. The old familiar coolness descended over her features. For 2 hours, she was quiet, withdrawn. But unlike before, she caught herself. "I'm feeling jealous and insecure," she admitted finally, the words clearly difficult for her. I know it's not rational, but seeing her name brings back that night, and how close I came to losing you. It was progress, undeniable progress. But a single step forward doesn't erase years of ingrained behaviors. 2 weeks later, after a disagreement about holiday plans, I woke to silence again. The cold shoulder, the averted gaze, the performance of invisibility. It lasted only a day before she apologized, but it was enough. Some cycles can't be broken, they can only be escaped. Yesterday, I signed a lease on a new apartment. Today, I packed the last of my essential belongings while she was at work. Not everything. That would come later, after the lawyers had sorted out the details. Just what I needed to start over. I left a letter explaining my decision. Not angry, not accusatory, just honest. I had given the marriage one final chance, set clear boundaries, and those boundaries had been crossed. Self-respect demanded action, not endless second chances. My phone buzzed as I placed my keys on the kitchen counter. A message from Alexandra. "Still on for dinner tonight?" Found this amazing new Thai place downtown. We had reconnected as friends during these months, nothing more. The cautious rebuilding of a connection that had once meant something important. I hadn't been ready for anything beyond friendship while trying to save my marriage. But now, with the weight of that failing relationship finally set down, I felt the first stirrings of possibility. "Looking forward to it," I replied, closing the door behind me for the last time. As I drove away, my phone erupted with calls. My soon-to-be ex, no doubt returning home to find my letter. Another silent treatment that would never again be my problem to endure. I silenced the ringer without checking the screen. The hardest lesson I've learned is that you can't force someone to respect you. You can only choose to remove yourself from situations where respect is absent. Walking away isn't failure. It's the ultimate act of self-preservation. At the restaurant that evening, Alexandra smiled as I approached her table. "You look different," she observed. "Lighter somehow." "I feel lighter," I admitted, settling into the chair across from her. "Like I've finally put down something I've been carrying for years." She studied me for a moment. "No regrets." I considered the question carefully. The past 3 years had not been entirely without joy or meaning. There had been good moments between the manipulation and power struggles. But those moments had been increasingly overshadowed by the toxic patterns we couldn't seem to break. "Just one," I answered finally. "That I didn't value myself enough to set boundaries sooner." Alexandra raised her glass. To boundaries, then, and to whatever comes next. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. The simple, uncomplicated pleasure of being in the company of someone who saw me clearly and valued what they saw. Not the beginning of anything definite, but the end of accepting anything less than respect. Some would call my decision to leave cold or unforgiving. I call it necessary. The true measure of strength isn't how much you can endure. It's knowing when to stop enduring and start living again.
Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.